Hello, everyone. Today we are discussing ethical and social dimensions of information systems. Let me begin with one important point or issue. Uh, we all have to start with the idea that ethics is not something we add after a system has been designed or developed. Ethics is already present in the decisions we make about the system, all parts of the system, all aspects of the system. The moment we decide what data to collect, who can see the data, what to automate, and how decisions will be challenged, we are already making ethical decisions, ethical choices. So I want you to think about systems you use every day. For instance, mobile money we all use every day, student portals, learning management systems, online banking apps, social media, biometric attendance, and what have you. They may look like ordinary technologies, but each one makes decisions about our privacy, they make decisions about power, and they make decisions about responsibility, and they make decisions about trust. So I'm hoping that by the end of this lecture, you should be able to look at any information system and ask two critical questions. The first is, does the system work? And the second issue is even more difficult. Does it work fairly? And does the system work responsibly? So when we are talking about systems, when we're talking about ethics are basically about deciding what ought to be done, especially when different interests, different rights, and different consequences are involved. So for many of us, before we came into the class today, we may have relied on an information system to do one thing or the other, and the information system might have collected some information or data about you. Your phone records your location. WhatsApp may have recorded when you were online. If you use mobile money, the mobile money platform may have recorded your transaction. A learning platform may have recorded your login. If you are using Uber or a banking app, it may have recorded your activity. Even when you just open an email or create one, it all leads to digital traces of us online. So it means that every click, every login, every transaction can produce data. That data may later be combined with other data to create a picture or a profile of who you are, what you do, what you buy, where you go, and what you may do next. There are three ideas I want us to keep in mind as we proceed with this lecture. And these issues are privacy, power, and trust. Privacy basically concerns what other people or organizations know about us. Power concerns who can use that information we have left in the systems to influence or decide things about us. And then trust concerns whether we believe the system and the organization behind it will treat our data or even treat us fairly. So when we are dealing with systems, the ethical issue often does not begin with one dramatic event. It begins with ordinary data collection about us. The concern then becomes serious when data is combined, the data is shared, the data is sold, or is used to classify people in some way, or even used to make decisions that we cannot see, or decisions we cannot challenge. Now, let me show you where we are going in this lecture. First, we will examine the main ethical, social, and political issues created by information systems. Second, we'll look at principles that managers and information system professionals can use when making difficult decisions. Then third, we'll discuss privacy, we'll discuss intellectual property, accountability, and system quality. We'll also take some time to examine wider effects on work, the wider effects on access, social inclusion, and then the quality of life. And finally, we'll apply a structured framework to ethical, actual ethical dilemmas. For this particular lecture, I want you to see it as a lecture, not a lecture where you simply try to reproduce definitions in an examination. I want you to develop the ability to reason through a situation. Typically, in practice, a manager may face a system that is useful. A manager may face a system that is efficient and even legal, but still ethically questionable. For example, a university may be able to monitor every student's action on a learning platform. The question is not whether it can do so. The question is whether it should, under what conditions and with what safeguards it should do that. So basically, our discussions are going to center around these critical issues. Okay, information systems, as we have seen in lecture one, create ethical pressures on all of us because they do three things extremely well and at a very large, and they do it at a very large scale. Information systems collect and connect data. Yeah, so the systems create ethical pressures because they do three things extremely well, and they do it on a very large scale as well. First, they collect and connect data. Every organization may combine our identity, our location, our payment history, if we are dealing with mobile apps, our academic record, and even our online behavior. Even when each piece of information looks harmless, the combined profile can reveal much more than intentionally disclosed by us. So the second issue is systems automate decisions. Decisions may rely on scores, they rely on rules, they rely on algorithms, and all these decisions, all these metrics may influence admission, it may influence credit, it may influence the offer of credit, even employment, even insurance, the welfare benefits of people, and even access to services. The third issue is systems also redistribute power. The people who design and control a system determine what is measured, they determine what is visible, they determine what counts as normal, and what is rewarded or punished. So A typical example would be maybe if we consider a student portal that records attendance, it also records assignment submissions, fee status, and activity on learning platform. That information can help identify students who need support, but the same data can also be used to label, monitor students, or even exclude students. So understanding these things are very important. And so anytime we're talking about ethical issues, what it really means is that ethical issues, despite the fact that there are issues regarding technical design choices, we are dealing with issues that has to do with what? Our social choices. Yes. Then to move on a little bit further, I want all of us to imagine dropping a stone in a pond of water. The first ripple is close to the stone, but the effects move forward and they spread out. When information systems are introduced, it works in a similar manner. The first effect is usually technical. It changes how tasks are performed. The next ripple effect is ethical. Then the issues about privacy, the issues about consent, the issue about ownership and responsibility will then arise. Then we see social effects as well. People will change their behavior, people will change their relationships and expectations. And then finally, political questions emerge, such as what rules, what rights, and what regulations society should establish. So a typical example is if we use an AI-based essay grading system as an example. At first, the system appears to solve a workload problem. It may mark quickly and consistently, but then we begin asking questions. Is the system accurate for all the students, or is it penalizing some students? Can the system even understand the context? Can the students appeal? If they are appealing, who are they appealing to? Are they appealing to the lecturer, or are they appealing to the AI? Who is responsible if it makes a serious mistake? All these questions are very critical. Now, the difficulty is that technology often changes faster than the social norms and laws that we are all guided by. So by the time society agrees on the rules, the technology may have already been widely used, or even a new technology may appear. This means that managers cannot always wait for a new law before they act in a responsible manner. They need an ethical framework to guide them so that they can take decisions as and when ethical issues arise. Now, looking at the last slide, where we indicate that when information systems are introduced, they raise ethical, social, and political issues. They do so with regards to five moral dimensions of the information age. And these are five dimensions. And these five dimensions will give us a practical way to analyze information systems. So the first is information rights and obligations. And this one has to do with who controls our data, what duties come with collecting our data. And then the second one is property rights and obligations. And this one concerns who owns digital content, who owns the software, who owns the data, the models, and the ideas. The third one is about accountability and control. And this one has to do with who is responsible when the system causes harm, or when it makes a wrong decision. And then the fourth one is system quality. This one talks about how accurate, how reliable, and secure a system need to be before we can use it. And then the final one, which is the fifth one, quality of life. When we use systems, how does the system affect our work? How does it affect our access? How does it affect our well-being? How does it affect dignity and social equality? So all these things, our responses to them will vary. Our responses to them will vary. And so we have to understand that one system may one system may involve all five dimensions at the same time. And so when we are analyzing the technology, we need to avoid simply that the technology is simply classifying the technology as good or bad. That's vague. We need to identify the specific moral dimension, the stakeholders who are affected, and the competing values and the safeguards that we need to be able to protect people. Okay. Now, I want us to proceed to look at each of the 5 moral dimensions. So the 5 moral dimensions we listed are information rights, property rights, accountability and control, system quality, and quality of life. So I now want us to look at the first one. With regards to information rights and obligations, the central question here is pretty straightforward. And the question is, what information can an organization legitimately collect, store, analyze, share, or sell about a person? And that's selling it about a person. That's what we basically mean by monetization or whatnot. The fact that someone uses a system does not automatically mean that every form of data collection is what is acceptable. There is the need for a meaningful consent. And meaningful consent requires that people understand what is being collected about them, why it is being collected, and how it will affect them. Information should be accurate. Whatever information we are also providing should be accurate. People should have a way, and when we provide this accurate information, people should have a way to correct their records maybe later on and challenge decisions made from those records. Let us consider, say, a university learning platform. Suppose the university analyzes login times, they analyze the reading activity of students, student assignment submission, and even class participation, and they use this to predict which students may fail or pass. The question is, should the university be doing this without informing the students? Yeah, that is a critical issue we should be asking, the ethical issue we should be asking. So those of you who say yes may argue that early intervention may help students if they are able to predict that some students may fail. And those of you who are saying no may worry about the fact that this is about surveillance and this is about labeling people inappropriately. The more balanced answer is that learning analytics may be beneficial. If we are relying on analytics, learning analytics in this particular context, it may be beneficial. But the university should explain the purpose. They should also be able to limit the use of the data and so that they can protect their confidentiality and ensure that maybe a lecturer reviews the prediction before acting on it. So in such a scenario, a prediction should support a student and not necessarily define the student. The second moral dimension is property rights and obligation. And here, our concern is about digital property and the fact that digital property creates an unusual ethical problem because it can easily be copied. It can easily be copied in a very fast manner and in a perfect way. And this can be done without removing the originality or removing the origin from its owner. But the thing is, the fact that copying is easy does not mean ownership will disappear. When you copy it from someone, it doesn't mean that the person will lose ownership of the digital property. In terms of property rights, I want us to look at it in the context of these 4 issues: the context of copyrights, patents, trademarks, and what, and trade secrets. What do they mean? Copyright protects the original expression, such as books. If someone writes a book, copyrights protect the person, reports, lecture notes, photographs, videos, and software, whilst patent protects certain inventions, and then trademark protects names, brand identities, symbols, and what have you. Then trade secrets protect confidential business knowledge. But let's even bring this into an academic context. Assuming a student copies a lecturer's slides and upload them online without the lecturer's permission, it raises issues. Another student may submit material that is produced by AI without acknowledging the AI. That is also another issue. And then the researcher may also download the data set and use it beyond the terms of the license of the data set. Now, if you look at all this, you see that there are instances that it is clearly wrong, and some of them require more discussion. But the key principle is that ethical use requires what? Permission. When we want to use digital property in an ethical way, it requires permission, it requires proper licensing, it requires attribution or legitimate exception. So in this particular instance, in an academic work, transparency is very important for us. If I use an AI tool which has contributed substantially to an assignment or a paper I'm writing, I have to follow either the journal's guideline or the institutional rules and policies and disclose how I have used the software. Similarly, you guys as business professionals, misuse of digital property can lead to a lot of problems. It can lead to what? Legal problems, but it can also lead to reputational damage or even loss of trust. Then the third moral dimension is accountability and control. You see, information systems involve many actors. And these actors may be a software vendor, it may be a developer, a manager, a data officer, a user, a regulator. So when something goes wrong, each person may point to someone else. So a typical example is suppose a university system wrongly blocks a student from registering because payment was recorded incorrectly. What happens? The finance office will say the system made the decision. That's what they will say. The vendor may also say that the data was wrong. The student, the student is the one who will lose a lot of time and perhaps miss the deadline and other things. In this case, the question we should be asking about accountability and control is who is responsible? Who is responsible? Who had the authority to prevent the problem? And who has the duty to correct the problem? So when we are talking about accountability, it is not only about identifying who caused the error. That's not what we are concerned about. It is also about determining who had knowledge, determining who had authority, and the capacity to prevent or correct the harm. And so a responsible organization defines these issues in advance. They try to define it in advance. It establishes the organization will establish rules, they will establish audit trails, they will also establish escalation protocols so that if there's a problem and the remedies, it does not necessarily tell the affected person that, oh, the computer says this, as if the system were independent of what? Of human decisions. So it is important for us to note that technology cannot carry the moral responsibility by itself. It is us, people and institutions, we remain accountable for the systems we select. We remain accountable for the systems we design. The fourth one is system quality. And here, the question is, when is a system good enough to use, for us to use? The answer to this depends on the consequences of an error. Say a mistake in music recommendation may be very annoying to us. If I'm listening to music on iTunes and I get a wrong recommendation, I may get annoyed. A mistake in an examination results, a mistake in a payroll record, even more dangerous is a mistake in a medical system or a banking transaction. It can be life-changing. So we're saying that system quality problems may come from software bugs or software's poor design, or sometimes even hardware failures. Sometimes too, it can just be unreliable network or poor quality data. Many failures are not caused by necessarily bad programming. They begin with incomplete or outdated or inaccurate data. For example, a system may process a wrong student record very efficiently. Hmm? It may do it wrong record very efficiently. And this should draw our attention to something. This means that speed does not make the outcome correct. The fact that it was done efficiently doesn't mean it is what? It is correct. And so if you look at this, we can start asking ourselves, which is more dangerous? If we have a slow but accurate system or a fast system that is wrong 5% of the time, which one do you think should be which one do you think will be more dangerous? So there's no one right answer to this, but it all depends on the context. What is the context? Who bears the cost of the error? Can the error be corrected? And so when we're dealing with system quality, we are talking about the fact that ethical system quality requires proper testing. It requires proper data validation, backup procedures. It requires even user training and a clear mechanism for correcting the errors that may occur. So the higher the potential harm of a system, the higher the standard of what reliability should be. So a manager who deploys a very high risk system without adequately testing it is not merely making a technical mistake. The manager may be failing in a duty of what? In a duty of care. And then the last one is the quality of life. Information systems affect how all of us, how we live, how we work, and how we participate in society. And so when services move online, we have to note that some people gain convenience, but others too may be excluded because of weak internet access. They may be excluded because of their disability or because of their low digital literacy. Sometimes to even language barriers or the cost of devices and the cost of data may be the issue. And this can cause a digital divide. It can lead to issues about equity and what? And access. Now, digital systems also affect work. Employees may feel that they must respond at all hours because you are now working online. You have to work every time because people send you messages on WhatsApp. The online system will always send you alerts and what have you. They may experience, and when people go through this working every time, they may go through a lot of stress, techno stress, attention overload, and even their eyes can be strained, or even reduce personal contact can also be a problem. Then there's also the issue of cultural fit. Cultural fit. A system that is designed elsewhere may assume stable electricity. It may also assume individual ownership of devices. It may also assume that English language fluency among everybody, or even it may assume that there's formal employment across board. All these assumptions may not match the realities of every community, especially in developing countries, and this can lead to a lot of problems. So I want you to think of an online service that you have used that became more convenient for some people, but also more difficult for others. And we can look at several examples from that perspective. Now, also note that the social impact of technology is not only negative. Information systems can expand access to a lot of things. It's 7 o'clock. It can expand access to education. It can expand access to finance, health services, and even markets. And so the ethical question is whether the benefits and burdens are fairly distributed. And an information system should not be called successful because it works for the easiest users. We must always ask about who is excluded, who pays the hidden cost, and what alternatives remain available for others. Now, we have been discussing issues regarding ethical dimensions for some time now. But you see, as we speak today, there are more ethical questions which have become more difficult for us to deal with than they were 20 years ago. And one reason about this is the fact that technology, the growth in or advancement of technology has made this even harder. One critical one is what? The greater computing power. Organizations these days can process more information and make more decisions at far greater speed than before. Then there's also the fact that it is now very cheap to store data. It is now possible to keep vast quantities of data for long periods, even when the purpose is what? Is unclear. Then there's also the issue about advanced analytics. These days, organizations can infer characteristics or determine trends that people never would have been able to do 10 years ago. And then there's also the issue about networking. These days, data can move between devices in a seamless manner. It can move between platforms across countries almost instantly. And that raises ethical issues too. The fifth reason is mobile technology. The phones we use, our mobile phones continuously generate a lot of information about our location, about our communication, about our movement, and even about our behavior. And so you see, all these trends create a lot of ethical risk for us. The important thing is that the scale of it changes the nature of the harm. So if you have a biased human, if a biased human decision may just affect one person, but if you have a biased automated system, it can affect thousands or even millions before anyone can notice it. There's also the problem of what? Invisibility. Many digital decisions they just happen in the background. We don't see it. We don't know how it happened. And so users may not know what they have been scored, how they have been scored, how they have been classified, or how they have been profiled. Technology, therefore, increases not only capability, but it also does what? It also increases our responsibility. The more an organization can know and do things, the more carefully it must govern that power. And so, even in modern data analysis, uh, we can use technology to identify patterns that people may never have been able to do. Suppose a retailer combines the purchase history, location, browsing behavior, payment patterns, and many other information. From this, they can infer a person's income level. They can also infer a person's health concerns. They can also even infer the fact that there is a tendency of this guy to change a job. This is what we call profiling. The systems we use can also they can be positioned to identify non-obvious relationships. We call it NORA, non-obvious relationship awareness. Two people may be connected because they use the same device. Two people may be connected because they visit the same locations. Two people may be connected because they communicate with the same contacts or share financial patterns. All these techniques are very useful. They can be very useful. And banks can detect fraud through that. Health systems can also use it to identify risk. Universities can also use it to provide unique support. But the same technique can also lead to a lot of problems. It can lead to discrimination, it can lead to manipulation or unjustified suspicion. Now, I want to introduce an interesting concept, the concept of net neutrality. And I want to I want to explain that by using UDS's, UDS's will be an online MBA. Imagine that the UDS School of Business launches a completely online MBA for students across Ghana and other countries. Under the concept of net neutrality, we are basically saying that internet service providers treat lawful online content broadly and equally. So a student can access our educational content without the provider deliberately slowing one institution down, assuming we are competing with, say, tech, while giving another a paid advantage. And so with the concept of net neutrality, we're basically saying that internet service providers should charge consumers for the content or for the data in an equal manner. And so if we have competitors and we are both competing in the same space, and the net neutrality, the internet service provider should treat all our lawful online content in an equal manner. Now, imagine that the same internet provider offers fast internet connectivity to institutions that can pay more. Wealthy international universities, what may happen will be that they will be able to deliver smooth video lectures than us, while those of us who are local institutions may experience slower access. And you need to understand that students with limited resources may be pushed towards selected platforms that have commercial agreement with the provider. So in that case, many of our students will run away from us and go to the, the international one. Now, if you look at this carefully, the question I want to pose is this mainly a technical problem or a business problem or an ethical problem? Technically, what this means is that it basically concerns how internet service providers manage networks. Economically, it is about what? Competition and pricing. And I know many of you will come from this angle. But if you look at it carefully in an ethical manner, it concerns fair access. Fair access to what? To education, and whether money should determine the quality of what? Of digital opportunity. Okay. Now, I want us to look at some aspects of one aspect of privacy, one aspect of the ethical issues that we have been discussing, and this has to do with the issue of what? Privacy. We all use the internet one way or the other. And one thing many of us do is we click accept on websites without reading what we are accepting. And when we do this, it leads to a lot of things about what? About our privacy. Now, there are critical internet challenges to our privacy. And anytime we're talking about privacy, we are talking about privacy in the context that all of us, we are free moral agents who should be left alone. And so data about me should not be collected without my consent. People should not invade my privacy and whatnot. But how do these tools challenge our privacy when we are online? The first one I want us to discuss is cookies. Cookies can remember a user and track the user's activity across various sites. So you go to a website, you are clicking around, and then before you realize something pops on and say this website accepts cookies. And most often than not, we accept without knowing what we are doing. But what it basically means is that accepting the cookies means that when I'm returned, the cookies will collect some critical information about me the moment I say that. There's also the issue of web beacons. Web beacons are tiny graphics that are embedded in our emails. And web beacons can report whether a web page or whether an email has been opened. So someone sends an email and there's a little graphic attachment. This is what we're talking about. Then there's also the issue of spyware. Spyware can monitor our behavior without even our consent. Sometimes they get installed on our devices without our consent because they do it in a very conspicuous manner. All this can lead to what? Behavioral targeting. And behavioral targeting uses our browsing behavior, our browsing activity, our data to personalize advertisements, to personalize recommendations, and sometimes prices for us. These tools can be very convenient. A website may remember your preference or recommend something relevant because you have visited the website before. But what we need to understand is that tracking can also be used to manipulate our attention. It can also be used to discriminate between different users or even create a detailed profile that people cannot inspect. I want to find out how many of you read the cookie notice before accepting it? Not many of us. And this reveals a problem. And the problem is clicking accept does not always mean informed agreement. You have not read it. By the moment you click accept, you have accepted, but does it really mean informed agreement? You were not informed when you clicked it. So users may have no practical alternative, especially you visit a website, you want to book a flight and this notice pops up about cookies. You just click on it and you go on. Okay. Now, the ethical challenge is to give people meaningful control rather than the appearance of control. So you go there, whether you click on it. If you click on accept, you proceed. If you don't click on accept, you are not able to proceed. There are also technical privacy solutions we can consider. Several tools can improve our privacy. For instance, the use of what? Encryption. Encryption protects information from unauthorized reading. Even those of us who are using WhatsApp, you come across the fact that your messages are what? Are encrypted. We can also rely on anti-spyware software to detect harmful programs. Sometimes even using your browser, you can enable private browsing. For instance, with Chrome, you can go to an incognito mode so that your browsing will not be tracked. It will be very private. But you have to understand that these tools do not solve every problem. Private browsing, for instance, does not make a person invisible to the internet provider. It does not make you invisible to your employer or even the website you are browsing. There are always default settings, and these default settings often favor data collection. And that's why we think you should look at some of these things to limit privacy. Privacy policies are frequently very, very long. Look, there's an issue about device fingerprinting, which is used to identify users without traditional cookies. Data may also be shared with third parties that the user has never heard of, but you may have agreed to the fact that your data can be shared with what? With third parties. Now, I think I have already mentioned the issue about the fact that digital property these days is easy to copy. They have some unusual characteristics, and one of it is the ease of copying. The cost of copying is almost zero. When we have digital properties, it can easily be transmitted instantly. They can easily be edited. They can be shared widely. And sometimes too, the ownership can be what? Can be difficult to trace. And all this creates opportunities for us in terms of education, opportunities for innovation, but it also may lead to what? Misuse. It may lead to misuse, a lot of misuse. Think about PDF textbooks. Think about softwares, lecture slides, photographs, data set, music. Look, all of this you can easily share it with a friend. Other than if it was a printed book, it would be difficult for you to do that. Now, let's pay attention to something which is very relevant to what many of us are experiencing these days online: AI. You see, traditional information systems mainly just store, they retrieve, and process your information. AI systems, on the other hand, can infer, they can classify, they can recommend, they can predict, and they can generate content. Look, the whole process can look very simple. A typical example is data can be used to enter into we can put data into a model. The model then produces an output, and someone acts on the output. But the ethical problem can arise at every stage because the data we inputted initially may be incomplete or it may be wrong. But the model may perform well on average, but poorly for a particular group. That's what happens. And sometimes, too, the data you put in, the fact that the data you have put in is wrong or incomplete, the output that is going to emerge is also going to be incomplete or so if you rely on this, it can create some problems. And that leads us to the issue of bias. Automated systems faces issues of bias in several ways because bias can enter into an automated system, and it can do this in several ways. Let's start with the issue of data bias. The historical data that we want to put into a system eh, the data can be biased. The data can be biased. And so we are saying that when we have issue of data bias, it can happen when the the historical information or the historical data reflects some kind of inequality or excludes some people or groups. When you feed this into an AI, the AI is going to be biased. We can also have design bias, and design bias occurs when those who develop the systems, they choose particular variables, they choose particular categories, or they use some thresholds or objectives to design the software. Then finally, we can have impact bias, and impact bias occurs when the consequences of an error fall more heavily on some people and less on some people. Then there's also an issue of surveillance. Surveillance, productivity, and dignity at work. Look, employers, those who have employed us, they have every reason to monitor some activities, some of our activities online. They may need to protect confidential information or even prevent fraud or ensure that there's safety or ensure that they are able to measure performance accurately. Look, but from the perspective of employees, they may have a legitimate interest in what? In their privacy. They may have a legitimate interest in in exercising some autonomy, trust, or even dignity. But modern systems are able to monitor whatever we are doing. They can monitor our attendance, they can monitor what keys we are pressing, keystrokes, they can monitor our emails, our calls, our locations, and whatever we are doing. And so the question I want to pose to you is, would you work differently if every click on your computer were recorded and evaluated? Maybe you will not be distracted. Do you think that will increase productivity or will it rather stress you? It is important for us to note that monitoring can change our behavior, but it can also lead to what? Creating fear, reducing creativity, and even damaging organizational culture, because all the time, whatever you are clicking on, you think you feel that someone is looking over your shoulder. And when this happens, employees may focus on appearing busy. They won't be doing anything, but they just pretend that they are doing rather than doing meaningful work. Okay. Now, as we draw to the end of the class, I want to introduce something. All these ethical issues that we are talking about, we have to note that when people face a little dilemma, they often will jump immediately to an opinion. But in this lecture, we want to suggest that a better approach is for you to slow down and follow a stepwise process for what? Ethical analysis. When you are confronted with an ethical dilemma, try to follow this. First of all, try to always establish the facts. And in establishing the facts, you always try to ask what happened, what data and systems are involved in this thing, what do we know, and what are we assuming. When you have understood the facts, you then move on to the second issue. Try and identify the ethical conflict. Try and identify the ethical conflict. Is it privacy? Is it about efficiency? Is it about security? Is it about innovation? Or is it just about profit and public interest? What is the conflict? Is the conflict about privacy and efficiency, security, access, innovation, fairness, or profit and public interest? And then the third thing is identify who is involved. Who are the stakeholders affected, including people who may not be visible or people who may not even be what? Who may not even be powerful, right? Then also try and list the fourth one is list your options, and your options should be what? Realistic. Avoid presenting only an extreme choice between doing everything and doing what? Doing nothing. What are the choices? What actions are realistically what? Available? And then the last one, you assess your consequences. The consequences would be in terms of who benefits, who is harmed, is the harm reversible, what precedent would the decision create? Now, let me ask this. Suppose the university discovers that monitoring UCM activity can predict failure, or a learning management platform, if they monitor it, they can predict failure. Let's apply the first two steps to see what facts do we need, what values are in conflict. We can discuss this and see. And so in all our ethical analysis, we have to know that ethical analysis may not produce complete agreement. It may not produce complete agreement. The main purpose of this is to make the reasoning visible so that people know that you are not what? Subjective. You also want to make your ethical decision defensible and open to what? Open to challenge. Now, in terms of ethical behavior with technology, I want us to look at some principles that we can use to guide our ethical decision. The first one is the golden rule. And the golden rule often asks that, look, you have to treat others as you would want to be what? To be treated. And so, with regards to the golden rule, you should always ask, will I accept this treatment if I were the person affected? If no, then if no, will I accept this treatment if I were the person affected? If no, then don't do it. The second one is the principle by Immanuel Kant, also referred to as the Kant's categorical imperative. And the question that one asks, the Kantian principle asks is, could this action become a general rule without undermining society or a organization? This can be used to guide our ethical behavior. Then we also have the slippery slope. And the slippery slope asks that, is asked the question, what happens if this action is repeated on a large scale? If it's repeated on a large scale and the effect will be tremendous, then it should not be done. Then it will not be ethical to do it. Then we have the utilitarian principle. Often with this principle, people who rely on this principle are often described as being selfish because it asks often the question, which options create the greatest overall benefit or value? But it also remembers that the vulnerable minority should not be simply what? Sacrifice. Then the last one, which is almost the opposite of the utilitarian principle, the last but one, talks about the risk aversion principle. And it favors that before you take an ethical decision, this particular principle favors the option you should follow. And the option, it suggests that the option you should follow should be the one with the least irreversible harm. You choose the option with the least harm or irreversible at cost. Then the last one, most interesting one, the no free lunch principle. And this one reminds us that digital content, anytime we come across digital content and resources, digital resources, we have to assume that they are owned. They are owned. Somebody owns it, unless the owner has clearly released them. So there's no free lunch. You see a free Wi-Fi, you see a Wi-Fi without a password and you jump onto it. It may be vulnerable. It's not ethical to jump onto things like that. Note that no single principle is sufficient for everything we come across as part of our professional life. You can apply at least two. If they point in different directions, you try and explain why and identify whatever safeguard that will best address the conflict or the dilemma you are facing. I want to end by emphasizing that ethics cannot depend entirely on whether one individual happens to be careful or one individual is just courageous and does things in a particular way. Whatever we are doing as part of our professional lives, in our organizations, there are professional codes of what? Of conduct. And these professional codes of conduct create standards for responsible behavior and responsible conduct. But we also have to note that codes are useful only when organizations translate them into practical controls. We can look at four areas. We can think about it in the context of four areas: policy, codes of conduct regarding policy, and this will define acceptable rules, privacy rules, access rights, and data attention. Then there's also the issue of process. And this includes processes involving risk assessment, audits, approval procedures, and incident responses. There's also one critical thing. Anytime we are discussing issues regarding systems, we cannot forget about people. People includes training, providing people with clear responsibility and the channel for what? For raising concerns. And then the last one, technology. Technology includes access controls, logins, backups, security tools, and all kinds of safeguards that we can use. Let me end with this question. Assuming UDS begins using student analytics, what control will you place under each of these four areas regarding policy? We should be very explicit about what kind of data we are collecting about our students and how we are using it. Okay. I think this brings us to the end of the lecture for this particular topic. Thank you.